Hi Halloweenies, I'm Ozzy the Horror Cub. Take a trip with me to Shadyville because it's time to review Fear Street 1994. Let's get into it. Let's start off by saying that this will be a spoiler review. We're going to be talking about all the gory details in this movie. This is a splatter fest. I was not prepared for this movie to be rated R. This is based off the R.L. Stine books, the Fear Street series. R.L. Stine, famous for the Goosebumps series. I was a millennial growing up in the 90s. Goosebumps was everything to me. Watching on YTV Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark got me into horror, so R.L. Stine played a huge role in that, and I was really excited to see how Netflix was going to bring this adaptation to life. This is 3 movies. They're going to be taking place within the next 3 weeks. The next sequel that we're going to be seeing is Fear Street Part 2. It's going to be taking place in 1978, and that's going to be released on Netflix in July 9th. It's going to be followed up with Part 3, 1666, which is going to be taking place July 16th. This is a trilogy movie event. The first part taking place in 1994, and let me tell you something, they got the 90s on perfect. I know I was only 4 years old in the 90s, but I do remember all these songs. This is 90s nostalgia to the max. There's so much grunge in this movie. Fashions are iconic. The lighting is amazing. The opening scene in the mall, they got the lighting so dead on with all the lights turned off and the neon. The 90s was all about that great neon lighting. This really did feel like Stranger Things meets Scream, meets Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, meets Goosebumps. Add slasher to it, and there you go. It was a little bit of mixture of Halloween with a little bit of Scream with a little bit of Friday the 13th, and you know what? It worked really well. However, this movie is an hour and 47 minutes, and I do feel that they could have shaved some time off. The film is set in Shadyville. Rival town is Sunnyvale. Now, weird things have been occurring in this town for the past 300 years, and what we're soon going to discover is a witch has placed a curse on the town that makes people commit mass murders. The film opens with such a great reference to Scream. We get Maya Hawke, and she's playing Heather. Now, her name could be a reference to A Nightmare on Elm Street with Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy Thompson, our OG final girl from 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. She's serving me great Casey Becker. This is one of the most famous people that's in the movie, getting killed first. So this is a complete reference to Scream 1996, directed by Wes Craven. It's that Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore reference of killing your most famous person straight off the bat. And there's a lot of great camera angles, and the lighting and the music is great in these scenes. The first 10 minutes of this film really got me hooked. I was in it, and of course we all know that the Casey Becker reference is a reference to 1960s Psycho. As a horror fan going into this movie, that's what you're gonna find. This movie is all about references and Easter eggs. Whether it be Kate babysitting, and that could be an homage to Halloween, whether that be in the next installment, we're gonna be going to Camp Nightwing because this town has had a series of murders, and a lot of the key murders that we're gonna be following happened in 1994, 1978, and then finally 1666, wrapping up our whole story. And it follows our group of characters as they're uncovering this mystery of this town and what's occurring with these supernatural killers. There's a killing spree in this town, and it's all being orchestrated by a witch. So we have to uncover the origins of this town with these group of kids. And if that's reminiscent of Stranger Things to you, you're really going to appreciate this, and you're really going to appreciate the references if you're a horror fan, especially if you like slasher movies. But the next movie, taking place in 1978, is going to be taking place at Camp Nightwing. The killer's called the Nightwing Killer, and he wears a sack around his head. This is a complete reference to Friday the 13th Part 2. Jason didn't get his hockey mask until Part 3, and he wore a burlap sack on his head. It could also be a reference to The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I'm so into seeing the sequel of this movie. I really think it's going to give me all the 70s tea, and I love movies that take place at camp, whether that be The Burning, whether that be Sleepaway Camp. Cropsy is so much fun. Watch The Burning, it's on Shudder. This movie had a lot of gory scenes in it, and that's where this movie does get the R rating from. I wasn't really expecting them to do an R.L. Stine adaptation and go so heavy-handed in it. However, if you read the Fear Street books, there is death in it. The Goosebumps books are more toned down. Fear Street books are a little bit darker, and that's what this movie was. It really ran with the slasher genre. The kills were brutal. Maya Hawke being killed, and the first couple stabs, I was really surprised they were going to show that much blood. And then you get to the end of the movie with Kate, and she's going through the bread slicer, and that to me was so cool. It was so inventive. It was almost like a jigsaw trap. There was a lot of great gore in this movie. There's some carnage candy, as Randy from Scream 2 would say. So if you like gore, if you like the slasher genre, you're gonna love this movie. It's very Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark meets Goosebumps meets Scream meets Halloween. If you love the references that they're throwing at you, you're going to appreciate this movie. I just found it was a little bit too long. I think you could have shaved 15 minutes off of it. I understand what they're trying to do though. This is a 3-part series. They need to tell the whole story together. I think we're really going to have to take a look at this movie after each part has been released and then really look at it again and examine what we missed and what we learned from it. And I think that's what we're going to have to do. I think it drags from time to time. I think you could have cut out a lot of things in this movie. Whether that could be, you could have condensed the school scene into the supermarket scene, but the story was told, and it was told pretty effectively. It's just at some moments it did lose my interest, and at some moments the characters are just going so out of their way to make a reference to a horror film. Like I think at one point they were making a reference to Jaws, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes at that. So to me, I have a respect for the genre, and I love horror movies, and I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to be very tongue-in-cheek, they were trying to be meta, they were trying to be like the new age Scream, but sometimes it came across as, oh, they're just making a reference to a horror movie to make a reference to a horror movie. Like, oh, we're gonna give you a Shining moment just because you'll remember The Shining from 1980 with Jack Nicholson peeking his head through the door, you know, here's Johnny. And the references were gotten, but I think they just got, some of them went a little too heavy-handed for me, and I think they could have eased back a little on them. But if you're a fan of the horror genre, you're gonna appreciate this movie. For me though, it ran on a little bit far too long, and I really didn't understand where they were gonna go with this story. I thought this was gonna be a simple story about a slasher with a skull face mask, and it is about a slasher with a skull face mask, but there's so much more to the story. The second we start diving into the witch and we start diving into this group of characters following Dina and her group of friends as shenanigans ensue with her ex-girlfriend Sam. Sam is involved in a car crash after a candlelight vigil is held after the mall massacre. It's when Sam lands on Sarah Fear's grave. Now Sarah Fear was a witch and she was accused of witchcraft in 1666, so we're going to follow more of that story going into the sequel. For her part, that's going to wrap up in part 3. These group of kids have now uncovered the mystery of the town, and each film is now progressively going to dive deeper into the mythology of Sarah Fear. I'm really excited to see where this is going to take us. I think Netflix gave us a great horror movie. It's a fun slasher. If you love slashers and if you love the callbacks to the other films, you're going to appreciate this movie. I just wish they could have condensed it a little bit, but it's a great gore fest. So watch it with an open mind, watch it with low expectations. I think you'll have fun with it. I just think it dragged on a little far too long. I'm so excited to watch part 2, and join me in the next video as we're going to be reviewing Fear Street 1978. Can't wait to see this movie when it premieres on Netflix on July 9th. Well, Halloweenies, that's all the time that we have left for today. Hit that subscribe notification bell to be notified about all of our upcoming videos. Until next time, stay spooky.